Hello, in this video we're going to do a second example that uses conditional loops, but we're going to look at a situation where you're not going to take the input before you enter the loop and then once you get in the loop. In our last example we took an input before we enter the loop which just asked the question, but then we could modify the phrasing if the person didn't give us what we wanted. We're going to look at a pretty common example which is finding summations. So we're going to write a little program that continually takes integer inputs as long as the user doesn't enter 0. It should find the sum of all inputted values. So in this case we're simply finding the summation of values we input. So again, back to the kind of test to see what kind of loop we want to use. We don't know in advance how many values the user is going to enter. The user could enter one value or they could enter 100 values. So the point is we don't know, and for that reason conditional loops are particularly useful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to declare a variable called sum and I'm going to put 0 on it, and I'm going to make another value called val and I'm going to set it equal to 0. There will be a problem in a second, but we're just going to set it to 0 because that tends to be our habit. And what I can do is I can set up a while loop and say while val is not equal to 0. And you can probably already see the issue. But basically what this means is we're going to keep taking a new input for val as long as it's not 0. So val is equal to int input number. And then what I can do is I can say sum is equal to sum plus val using the self-referencing assignment statement. And then once I'm done the loop, I can print the total is sum. So if I run this, and before I run it, I'm actually going to comment out the stuff that I have up here. So let's just take that. There we go. And if I run this now, it doesn't do anything. It jumps right down to the total is 0. And that's because the Boolean expression evaluates the false right away and skips the while. So this is where I have to be really cognizant of the initialization value that I set val to. It doesn't matter what I set it to as long as it's not 0. So I'm just going to make that -1. And so now when I run it, when it gets here, this statement's going to be true, which will cause it to enter the loop. So if I run this, input a number, 1, 2, 3, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press 0 to stop taking inputs, and I get my total as 6. Now a nice little modification to this we can do, or a little add-on, is we can actually find the average of the values inputted. And so to do that, what I need to do is to keep track of the number of values I've inputted. So to do that, I'm going to make a count variable, and I'm going to set it to 0. And every time I take an input, I'm going to say count equals count plus 1. So what that does for me now is that I take an input, I add it to my sum, and I increment my count. So now when I'm done the loop, what I can do is I can say average is equal to the sum divided by the count. And we're going to print out the average value inputted was, I can say plus str average. Now my question for you is, do you see the problem? Let's run it. So I run it and I'm going to input 1, 2, 3. And if I exit, the average here should be 2, but I actually get 1.5. And the reason why I do is because notice every time I take an input, I increment count. So that means I'm going to have a count of 4 when really the 0 shouldn't be included. So one way to solve this problem is when I exit my loop is simply just to subtract 1 from count to counteract that extra plus. Input a number, 1, 2, 3, 0, and it worked. I hope this video helped, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask.